All right, so here's a handful of different profiles. Moving from left to right, you've got an old school chopping axe with a 4-pound head, and then you've got a newer cobalt 4-pound head chopping axe, and then you've got a steel splitting axe 5-pound head, and then an Estwing 8-pound head splitting maul with a lot different wedge shaped profile on that head. So first off, this is an old school chopping axe, and I need to do a lot of work on this to kind of clean up this old head. Found this lying around, and it's going to be a good axe. I'm probably going to have to put a new wedge in the top, but this is, if you look at the profile, this is a chopping axe, and you've got, first of all, this thin profile up through here, and this is about a 4-pound head. And so once we sharpen this up, this is going to be a really good chopping axe. And it's got this nice old hickory handle that I can probably save. This is a new version of a chopping axe. This is a Cobalt. I don't know what the other brand is on the other one. I can't see a stamp on the axe head. This is designed for chopping, also a 4-pound head. And if you look at the profile on here, you get a feel for that. It's probably a little bit wider than the other chopping axe that I have. Try and compare these two here. So that'll give you an idea. These are two different chopping axes, but I would say the first old school one is going to do a much better job. This new Cobalt, it widens out a lot more, kind of right off the bat, and so they're going to perform differently at chopping. And remember, the axes and mauls, they're either designed for chopping or splitting, and you need to make sure that you get the right tool for the job. So those other two are going to be great for cutting horizontally across trees and chopping down trees, or chopping big chunks of trees into smaller pieces, cutting horizontally. These, like this splitting axe, this is a steel, and if you look at the profile on this, how much wider that is, and this is a 5-pound axe head. This is going to be for splitting wood, so you're going with the grain, and this is not going to be a good chopping axe because of the weight and because of the profile. And then if you look at this splitting maul, this is going to be even more heavy duty for splitting, and this is not going to be good for chopping at all. And you look at the big wedge shape on that, that's a very serious splitting maul for heavy, knotty wood. And this is an 8-pound Estwing. Okay, and very different profiles on these two. So you've got a splitting axe and then a splitting maul, and even between these, look at the differences in profiles. So a splitting axe versus a chopping axe, the old school, and then the difference in profiles between a splitting axe and a chopping axe. This little bit wider, newer version of the chopping axe than this old school version I have. So they're going to do very different things for you. Now you can get away with some splitting with chopping axes, but it's only going to be for some of those smaller pieces of wood. Typically you're going to have to do more work if you're trying to cut and split large pieces of firewood with a chopping axe, but it is a useful tool in some instances. This was a big, knotty piece of wood, And that's why even with that 5-pound head on that steel splitting axe, it was having a hard time. And with that S-Wing 8-pound splitting maul, went right through. Okay. See, now that we got through that first main cut and around a lot of those knots, no problem for that steel splitting axe.